So I'm Shiv. I'm a data scientist here at Razor. So I deal with anything that has to do with AI and data here. So that could be, for example, doing innovation projects where I assess the best ways to use AI, or say helping a client decide the best way to use their data and implement AI in a way that just helps them make better decision making. I think the first place to start for me would be to do a basic data health check. So you want to understand how much of the data is being used manually, how much of it is being manually input in spreadsheets, are there any ad hoc fixes, how much of the data is actually being used by the company first. Once you get a handle on how usable the data is, how much of it is already being automated and how much of it is manual, only then you'll be able to start writing an implementation plan for AI. I think the biggest issue is inconsistent or messy data sets for me. A lot of data sets where things are being input manually, where there's a lot of ad hoc fixes, where people use spreadsheets in a different way, especially when there's data sets where there are no clear rules about formatting or about how data is being entered into them. Critical processes relying on magic spreadsheets, so legacy processes and spreadsheets. So AI models largely learn from the data that they receive. So if the data that they're getting is largely inconsistent, they actually start learning more from that noise rather than the actual patterns in the data. So they pick up on all that noise, and the AI output then starts becoming gibberish rather than useful. Right, so a scalable data architecture would be a data architecture that works the same, or at least without any major changes, for a company of 30 people and a company of, say, 300 people, so 10 times bigger. The core data architecture is the same throughout, doesn't rely on people loading in manually and doing things separately within different systems. It's got one core system where things can be loaded in quite a modular way, I'd say. Yeah, so for SMEs, a lot of the early systems are built for speed, not necessarily scalability. So a lot of the systems will end up relying on things like manual inputs in spreadsheets or some manual exports. And as the system grows, it grows in quite a fragmented way as opposed to growing by design. So a system that's been built for an SME of, say, 40 people will be just fine with some of these manual fixes or little ad hoc fixes. But when you scale it to, say, 300, 500 people, those same fixes then start becoming quite brittle. Yeah, so automation and AI rely on stable, structured data. If the foundation itself is quite messy, every AI project then begins with a considerable effort to fix that data. So you need to start doing repeated fixes, you need to start doing a lot of cleanup. And when you then introduce AI into the mix, that sort of data debt then becomes AI debt. So your AI project becomes slower, it becomes more expensive, not what you set out to be. The key marker for me would be when decisions start becoming more data-driven and supported by evidence, so supported by the data. So you'd start seeing things like conversations shifting from, are these numbers right, to what do we do about these numbers? How do we use them? People will start spending less time checking the data and spending more time acting on it. Yeah, so mainly dashboards will show a lot of information, but that information isn't necessarily tied to specific decision making. And they often rely on poorly defined metrics to begin with. Additionally, if data is not already your primary driver in decision-making in the company, a dashboard then starts to become something, it just becomes an extra screen to look at, and it can become quite stressful for people who are trying to use the dashboard to make a decision. So I would say dashboards need to be designed with a very key decision-making in mind, and your data needs to be what you're using to make decisions. Yeah, so disciplined data environment and data team to me is when people start taking clear ownership of data. They start taking clear ownership of processes and metrics that rely on the data as well. So clear definitions are enforced around systems and teams that use that data, and the data is then used to drive operational improvements, to drive commercial decisions. So that's, to me, a sign that the environment is ready for proper AI use, proper AI implementation.